Hello, and welcome to the webinar, Cloud Automation, a Recipe for Success, Ansible and OpenShift. This is part 3 of the webinar series, The IT Equation, Solve Today's Hybrid Cloud Challenges. I'll be your presenter today, Matthew Packer. I am a Principal Product Marketing Manager on the Ansible Automation Platform team, and I'll be joined by my colleague, Roger Lopez, who's a Principal Technical Marketing Manager on the Ansible Automation Platform team as well. So first off, I'll talk about the agenda for today. First, we're going to talk about what are the trends driving digital transformation in hybrid cloud systems. We'll then talk about what is Ansible Automation Platform and how it relates to OpenShift. We'll then talk about Ansible Automation Platform and how it helps take OpenShift to the next level, followed by Roger discussing Event-Driven Ansible, a new feature, and how that works out with Red Hat OpenShift, and that'll be followed by a demo of that new feature. So first, we'll talk about trends driving hybrid cloud system automation. You can see the stat here, container adoption will hit 50%. I think this was the 2022 statistics, but I think we all know that this is the way IT environments are going, right? It was 33% in 2020, 42% in 2021. We're probably closer to near 60% now of container adoption in 2023, and that will continue to grow. And with the growth of those containerized platforms, Kubernetes is that modernization platform of choice, right? So most organizations that are running those containers are choosing Kubernetes as that platform. And you can see right here, 74% of organizations are using Kubernetes in production that are using containerized system. And they expect 89% adoption in the next 2 to 3 years of those Kubernetes platforms. So it's really becoming a significant part of the IT ecosystem and from applications for enterprises and organizations. So what is Red Hat Ansible Automation Platform? So Red Hat Ansible Automation Platform is a way to automate across all the different domains you see there in a single IT platform to do it. Whether you're automating your infrastructure, cloud, network, or security. We have it broken up by domains here, and we'll be talking a lot about cloud today. But really what I can say is that the use cases will often span across domains. So you'll be running automation that will automate your cloud as well as some of your network infrastructure and security at the same time. So it really is a platform that is broken up by these domains, but it really spans across them. So what is Ansible Cloud Automation? So we see Ansible Cloud Automation made up of 3 domains. The first one is public clouds, right? That's automating your Google Cloud, your AWS, your Azure public clouds. The next domain is cloud native, which we'll be talking about today mostly, which is Red Hat OpenShift Container Platform Automation, automating Kubernetes, and Red Hat Advanced Cluster Management for Kubernetes, or ACM. And finally, the third domain is the private cloud, which is mostly about Red Hat's OpenStack platform, VMware, and Nutanix. Now, we find that most of the automation in this area is around VMware and Nutanix. So what do we mean when we talk about cloud automation? And right here, you have a good diagram kind of outlining how we view cloud automation. You can see across the top, there's these 3 buckets of orchestrate, operationalize, and govern. And we kind of see it as you can orchestrate your clouds, you can operationalize your clouds, and you can govern them with your clouds. And that really is what we see as hybrid cloud automation. And that spans across your public cloud, your cloud native, and your private cloud environments. And within those buckets at the top, domains, we kind of have individual use cases below those that really span across your hybrid cloud. And the first one is deployment and retirement. And this is really, right, the instantiation deployment of your infrastructure, provisioning of your infrastructure, and your retirement. And traditionally, when people think about cloud automation, this is what they think about. And there's also many other tools that do this as well, like HashiCorp Terraform, CloudFormations on AWS, and Azure Resource Manager on Azure. Right, those are excellent as well as doing deployment and retirement. But there's much more use cases and capabilities to cloud automation than just deployment and retirement. The next one we have is infrastructure orchestration. And this really has to do with coordinating your infrastructure in the cloud. Once you deploy an asset or an instance to the cloud, you still need to coordinate infrastructure around it. And we'll talk a little bit more about this later, how it applies to OpenShift, but it's about configuring and managing all your other infrastructure and network and security settings to make sure your deployments are successful. The next use case that falls under the orchestrate domain is really cloud migration. And this is a big one now, right? With the digital transformation going on, companies increasingly moving workloads to the cloud. Cloud migration is ever more important now. It could include such automation as migrating from one cloud to the other, but often it's from on-prem to cloud. And just an example, recently we had a separate webinar about moving SAP to the cloud, a customer Alta, and they were able to cut their migration time from on-prem to the cloud down from 2 weeks to within a day. So automation can play a really key part in migrating your workloads to the cloud. Next, we have the domain operationalize. And this includes the first one, infrastructure visibility use case. And what this really talks about is understand what you are running where. Right. One thing we all have heard about is cloud sprawl. And you really need to know what servers are running where to understand your cloud spend and what's going on. Ansible can make that happen. You can run it against your cloud, find out the tags on which resources, what regions they're running in, and what's going on. And you can build dynamic reports or HTML pages from that output to really get a quick idea of what's running and where. The next bucket we have, and we'll talk again further about this later, is cloud operations. And this has to do with kind of your day two tasks of running your cloud, such as patching, updates, configuration management changes as you go, right? This is a huge area where Ansible really shines. We'll talk a little bit more about this later. The next one is automated troubleshooting, right? So you're operationalize your cloud by having automated troubleshooting. This could span both sides of it. This could be using Event-Driven Ansible, which we'll talk about later, to get triggered off events and to fix that issue that's come up. Or it could be Ansible watching for an event and creating a ServiceNow ticket when it happens, so that an analyst or someone can come take a look at that ticket and go solve the problem. But either way, Ansible can play a part in automating the troubleshooting and remediation of that problem. The next one is govern domain. And within this, we have infrastructure optimization. And this is about right-sizing your infrastructure. For example, if you need to increase the CPU count or memory on a server in the cloud that is constantly maxing out, Ansible can do that. If you need to right-size it, say you have over-provisioned resources, Ansible can help you find that out and do it. So just like we talked about in infrastructure visibility, find out what you're running and where, you can optimize that infrastructure by shutting down the infrastructure you're not using that you found in the visibility use case. The next use case is business continuity. And this is really about keeping your business running, automated backups, avoiding downtime, switching regions on failures, etc. Ansible can automate all that, no intervention to make it happen, and then simplify it and make sure you can keep your business critical applications running and available. And the last one in governing your cloud, the use case compliance, right? And this is about making sure all your systems are compliant. Are they all tagged correctly? Do they all have the correct security settings? Are they all connected on the right domain or VLAN, et cetera? So this is really about just making sure everything's compliant. You can get that visibility into seeing it and then fix that compliance if necessary. So from what I said, right, you can really see how Red Hat Ansible Automation Platform is that glue for hybrid IT automation. So when you have your Kubernetes and your OpenShift clusters, right, Ansible is really the glue that connects those to the cloud infrastructure, to your networking, to your security, to all those ITSM, all those other pieces. Ansible is the glue that can connect it all and hold it together. Right, and Ansible for OpenShift enables organizations to automate the deployment and management of OpenShift systems and coordinate them with existing infrastructure using a simple language and YAML playbooks. Right, so that's why they're better together. Right, OpenShift is great management platform. Kubernetes, it's excellent at that, and Ansible can handle kind of all those off-cluster tasks that need to be done, and some on-cluster tasks as well. So what is the value of Ansible Automation Platform? Well, I talked about, right, kind of all the use cases it can do, and I'll speak specifically to OpenShift in a moment. But really, the value that Ansible really brings is that increased speed, right? And I touched on this previously, is that all these manual tasks that could take weeks to accomplish, Ansible can do that in days, right? Speed is hugely increased with Ansible. And what it also does reduces human error, right? No mistakes in clicking the wrong thing, leaving a check mark unset, right? Once your playbook's set up, everything's set, right? There's not going to be any error going forward with it. And that really leads to the maintenance of consistency, right? Everything's audible, verifiable deployments, right? You can use compliance to make sure everything is working and accurate and set up correctly. And it really excels at making sure that happens. Otherwise, right, hybrid clouds are very complicated environments, and Ansible helps maintain the consistency there and simplifies it. So how does Ansible take Red Hat OpenShift to the next level? Well, just a bit on OpenShift quickly, right? So OpenShift is a trusted enterprise Kubernetes platform, right? We all know that it's immutable infrastructure with Red Hat Enterprise Linux, Core OS, and Kubernetes together. It's an excellent, well-supported product by Ansible. It gives you that cloud-like experience everywhere, whether you're moving your workloads on-prem from one cloud to another cloud, it's going to be that same cloud-like experience no matter where you go. And it empowers developers to innovate. Right? So it's integrated with those developer workflows to get applications to production sooner, kind of in that DevOps mindset. And that brings me to kind of this next slide, which is Red Hat was recently ranked as a challenger in the 2023 Gartner Magic Quadrant for DevOps Platform. And Red Hat in this is Red Hat OpenShift platform together with Ansible Automation Platform is that DevOps platform from Red Hat. And you can see we're ranked a challenger. We are ranked the highest on ability to execute in the challenger area. And we were getting good reviews from Gartner in this. I think one of the cons they had about our setup was that you had to use OpenShift as your Kubernetes platform, which we see as a bonus. So it's very successful. And why they were together and why we did well was because Ansible allows for that off-cluster automation and configuration and coordination that we really need to have a successful DevOps platform. So when you talk about Ansible and Automation Platform and Red Hat OpenShift together, there's kind of 4 distinct use cases that really add value for you. The first is infrastructure orchestration. And I talked about this before, but in the area with OpenShift, right, it has to really do about coordinating those off-cluster resources, traditional resources, with your on-cluster OpenShift systems, right? So everything that's off-cluster in these diverse environments all outside of the cloud and the cluster, right, that's where Red Hat Ansible Automation Platform really brings value to your OpenShift solution. The next is cloud operations, right? So those repeatable last mile automations for your clusters, for your servers, right? Ansible can take care of all that. The next is lifecycle management. I think this is similar to that infrastructure optimization use case, but it's really about automating the infrastructure and application lifecycle management for Red Hat OpenShift. And the last one is business continuity, right? And this is the end-to-end business continuity and disaster recovery for your clusters, right? Making sure they are up, making sure your mission-critical applications are not down and they're always accessible. And that's really where Ansible delivers the value for OpenShift. So first, I'll talk about infrastructure orchestration, right? And it's really about coordinating those off-cluster traditional resources, whether it be physical network infrastructure, right, your DNS, load balancers, firewalls, spinning up instances, database instances on private or public clouds, hypervisors, right, pushing applications to the edge. All that kind of falls in this orchestration that you'll have to do outside of the clusters, OpenShift. As well as software as service, right? So creating tickets in ServiceNow, ITSM, or other service catalogs, right? Ansible can take care of that off-cluster work. And as well as security, right? Audits, incident reports, remediation for security, right? Ansible is really going to take care of all those off-cluster tasks that OpenShift needs that Ansible will take care of. Here's just an example of infrastructure orchestration with OpenShift. So what's shown here is, imagine you have a OpenShift application that's running in the public cloud in North America. With these execution nodes of Ansible in the different geos, you can use Ansible to push the application and configuration down to edge devices in both Europe and South Africa. So you have the main OpenShift cluster and application running in the cloud, but to support these diverse domains of devices, you can use Ansible to push those application parts down to these edge devices in other parts of the world. Next is cloud operations. So these are the repeatable last mile automation for Red Hat OpenShift clusters for configuration management. So these are things like groups and namespaces, logging, adding storage, LDAP, group sync, and authentication, image policies, etc. Right? All those off cluster and cluster hardware related tasks, Ansible can take care of that. Certificates and secrets and certificates is a big one, and Roger will be giving a demo on this later about using Event-Driven Ansible to push out a certificate for a cluster. Next was lifecycle management. So this is really the automation of cluster upgrades, right? So coordinating scaling events, upgrades to your clusters, adding working nodes, adding additional infrastructure, right? Ansible can help with that. And the same with application services, so automating the management of those applications and services. Next one is business continuity, and this is really an important one, right? A lot of OpenShift applications are mission critical. I've said this before, and really it's important to make sure those apps are accessible at all times. And Ansible can help you do cluster rebuilds and recovery. So you can have hot spares and streamlined restoration of your clusters, all with Ansible, all automated. Instead of manually going and spinning up everything again, Ansible in an automated way can take care of that. As well, it can handle the backup and restore, so stateful core services, right? It can go automate backups on your clouds of your images and be able to restore those volumes quickly when needed. And the last one is traffic redistribution, right? If there is a issue with the health of a cluster, let's say on a cloud region that's having problems, right? You can use Ansible to redistribute that traffic to a different region, possibly spin up a cluster in a different region and push the all traffic to that region there, all in an automated fashion with Ansible. And with that, I'm going to pass you to my colleague, Roger, who's going to talk about Event-Driven Ansible with Red Hat OpenShift.
Thank you, Matt. Appreciate it. So yes, we're going to be talking about Event-Driven Ansible with Red Hat OpenShift. But first, we want to talk a little bit about event-driven automation. So when we look at many IT operations today, there's a large amount of manual work involved. Think about the scenario where an outage occurs. There's multiple step process that's heavily dependent on human intervention. And it requires opening tickets, having multiple handoffs between different teams, and then of course, the process of actually fixing the issue. Similarly, when it comes to security risks, it's quite a procedure as well, right? Teams have to monitor systems to identify risks. Once a risk is identified, they notify the responsible parties, open a ticket, then get the appropriate teams to patch the risk, or maybe even initiate an automation job to fix the problem. It's a painful process, requires constant attention and action. However, a shift is happening towards a more streamlined automation process, namely event-driven automated operations. And in this approach, instead of monitoring systems to identify a risk, we can instead watch for specific events received, match a rule against a particular event, and apply a patch automatically, all without needing that human intervention. And the same efficiency can be said for, let's say, our outage resolution, right? Upon receiving an event, it's matched to a rule and the system responds and acts automatically. No more waiting, no more back and forth between teams, effectively speeding up the process to a solution. So when we think about typical event-driven automation process from the Red Hat point of view, right, we kind of break it up into, let's say, 3 different pillars. We have our receive, decide, respond. When we're thinking about receive, we're thinking about working with different sources for capturing those particular events. And then we have to make a decision. The decision is typically these type of conditionals that need to be met. So for example, when we're talking event-driven Ansible, we're looking for a conditional to be true to then go and do a response, or in this case, do an action, right? So the response could be an outage to an incident, or it can be a support team being notified, or like a remediation that needs to be executed. And when we look at the key building blocks of event-driven Ansible, we're actually talking about actually an Ansible rulebook. So when we look at an Ansible rulebook, it's kind of broken up into 3 different blocks. So one called sources, one called rules, and one called actions, right? So sources can be all the different sources that provide event-driven data that we want to use. When we're thinking about Ansible rulebooks, we're actually thinking about one specific source. So that source might be, for example, an OpenShift source plugin, or it can be something like Kafka, capturing messaging. And the rules are our conditions, right? What condition needs to be met before we can go and take an action against that particular rulebook. So this is an example Ansible rulebook that I have here. This one's actually creating a remediation of a web server. So if you've ever written an Ansible playbook, Ansible rulebooks look very similar. If you look at this rulebook here, we have the name automatic remediation of a web server, and it's taking all its hosts. And it has a source. The source is this Ansible.eda alert manager. So this source is essentially watching for events to come in. And we have some sort of rules. We have this rule named restart a web server. And the rule has 2 conditions. One condition is to look for a job label within our event alert that's named fast API. And then also look for an event that has an alert status of firing. So when these 2 conditions are met, we'll actually do an action. And in this particular case, the action is running a playbook. So in this case, the Ansible.eda.start app, right? So this is the whole process on how you run event-driven Ansible with having actions and running your playbooks. So to kind of give you a kind of visual of that, we can break it up into our observe, which is our event source, right? We're looking at, for example, that alert manager. We have an evaluate, which is we're watching for events as they come in. Event-driven Ansible has a rules engine that's part of Drools that makes a decision of when to take an action. When the condition is meant to set to true, it can take an action. Here I actually showed 2 different types of action. One, running the playbook, which I kind of previously showed in the last slide. But there's another action that you can have, which is like run a job template. So this is actually the one I'm going to be showcasing in the demo that I'm going to show shortly. And this is kind of the execution layers of event-driven automation. So this one here is similar to what you've already seen, but the thing to point out is you have your event sources, you have a optional messaging layer. And the nice thing about this is you can actually capture different events from different tools and actually use your messaging layer as your source for event-driven Ansible. And then you have a service layer, which handles the messages, while the routing layer handles essentially the decision-making layer, and it's reliant on the rules engine. And then finally, the actions, the automation process, right? Actually doing the Ansible playbooks. So in Ansible Automation Platform 2.4, which is going to be released at the end of July, we're going to have quite a few source plugins that are going to be available. We've actually worked with quite a few different partners like Arista, Dynatrace, F5, just to name a few. And then of course, we have certified community plugins that we're going to be using or have available to you, like the Kubernetes plugin, Kafka, Prometheus. So quite a few different options that are going to be made available with regards to event-driven Ansible. And this is only going to continue growing, right? We're only going to continue adding new plugins that are going to be available so that you can actually watch events and then take actions against them. So with that, I think we can go off and I can showcase the event-driven Ansible Red Hat demo that I'm going to provide you. So with regards to this demo, I'm going to showcase an SSL management, specifically the process of securing routes of your OpenShift applications. So think of it as a way that you have, let's say, an OpenShift cluster environment with certain security expectations. And one of those is to ensure that all applications that run within your OpenShift cluster have proper SSL certificates. And in order to achieve this, I'm going to use Event-Driven Ansible to watch for newly created routes within our OpenShift cluster, and then create properly signed SSL certificates and update the routes of our applications. And the nice thing about this is your developer doesn't need to know anything about SSL certificates, but they can take advantage of them because of Event-Driven Ansible, right? So one of the goals of Event-Driven Ansible is to make it easier for you to take action on different events, specifically wherever those events may occur, just like in an OpenShift cluster. So with that, let me share my screen so I can show you this environment. So hopefully here you can see my screen right now showing a couple windows here. Here we're looking at basically an environment that's going to be showing Event-Driven Ansible with Red Hat OpenShift. I actually had this exercise that I actually showcased at Red Hat Summit. So what you're looking at here is a particular host that has access to an Ansible automation platform environment, which you will showcase here. We have a Red Hat OpenShift environment, and we have a Bastion host, which is essentially just a server where we have two different terminals and we're going to interact with it. So in this exercise, I'm going to be showcasing how you can set up an Ansible rulebook that's going to kick off an Ansible job within Ansible Automation Platform controller that's going to create a new route for your Ansible Automation Platform with the updated SSL certificate. So to kind of get things started, let me showcase you a little bit of what's happening. So I have this playbook here. So one of the things about rule books is rule books are very, very easy to write. I'll actually show you the exercise solution here. This is the solution that we have for this particular rule book. It takes a particular source, it takes a rule, and then takes an action. In this particular case, we are looking at our sources. We're actually using a upstream version of the Kubernetes environment for looking at the Kubernetes plugin. And here we're looking for kind route. And within our rules, what we're doing is we want to patch our route anytime a new route is created because an application is created. So in this case, we're looking for an added route. And then we're going to take an action on it. And that action is to run a job template. And when we look at this job template, specifically, I'm running this EDA OpenShift exercise 2 job template. When I go to my Ansible Automation Platform environment and I look at my templates, I have this already preloaded job template here. And one of the things it's looking at is when it goes off and runs, it's going to run a specific playbook, this OpenShift cert playbook. And if I look at this playbook, what I have in it is I have all the logic that I need to actually go off and properly add a Let's Encrypt SSL certificate to any application with a route within my OpenShift environment. So effectively what's happening here is I have a task that's going to create my issuer so it can handle these Let's Encrypt certificates. I'm going to actually go off and create the certificate that I need. And then I'm going to go off using the Kubernetes Core K8 module. I'm going to patch the route using my cert manager annotations to probably put the SSL certificate on the application. So to kind of showcase that, and actually let's go off and do it. First thing we want to do is we're going to write a rule book, right? So I'll take this example right here and I'll kind of go through it again here real quick. So I'm going to go to my demos, EDA OCP Git repository. And I'm going to just create this exercise 2-rulebook.yaml. And I'm going to show you the example rulebook, and then to save time, I'm actually going to copy over the solution. But when we look at the example rulebook, what we have here is we're providing a name for our rulebook, example rulebook, which host we want to interact with, and then our sources. In my case, we're going to be using this special source plugin in order to interact with our Kubernetes cluster. But here you would provide the proper name of your source, what API version that source might be using, the kind of that resource, and then providing a rule. So what type of action you want to do, some event. Maybe that's adding a type, or maybe that's talking about deleting something or modifying. And then the action is going to be taking some run job template. So to speed up things here, I'm going to copy my solution into this exercise 2 rulebook. Then now if we look at that exercise 2 rulebook, what you're going to see is we're going to be listening for newly created routes. We're going to be using this Sabre 1041 EDA Kubernetes source plugin, which is actually a plugin that was created by one of my colleagues here at Red Hat. And we're going to be listening for kind route. And then what we want to do is when a route is created, we want to then essentially patch that route. So what we want to do now is that we have our route. We actually want to go off and we want to run our Ansible playbook. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this directory here. And I already have a pod. If I look at Podman images, I have an Ansible rulebook container image that I'm using. And what this does is it's going to essentially simplify the having to actually go off and install Ansible rulebook. Instead, I'm going to use a container image that then I can go off and run against, making it a little easier. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to run this container image. And now that I'm in this container image, I'm going to run this setup sh that I have. And this is just some packages like Kubernetes pip, like pip install of Kubernetes request, the collection I'm going to be using, the Sabre 1041.eda collection, all little things that I require for this specific demo. And once that's all done, the next thing I want to do is I'm going to use an OC login command, which effectively what this is going to do is it's going to allow me to log into my OpenShift cluster so I can interact with it when an Ansible rulebook event takes off. So here, when I have my OC login, I'm going to log in. Now I have access. And now I'm going to go into my exercise 2 directory. And now that I'm in my exercise 2 directory, I'm going to run that rulebook with the exercise 2 rulebook that I had just created. So what this looks like is via command line, I am using the Ansible rulebook CLI command. I'm passing it an inventory, which in this case is just localhost because it's making a connection to my OpenShift cluster. I'm specifying my rulebook, which is exercise2 rulebook.yaml. I'm saying that I want to have verbosity so I can see the output of what's actually happening. And then I'm providing my controller URL as well as my controller token. And these are coming from my Ansible automation platform. So within my Ansible automation platform environment, I actually had my admin user, and I went in and I created a specific token to access this Ansible automation platform environment. So now that I have this Ansible rulebook ready to go, I'm going to click enter. And what this is going to do is going to kind of fire up the Ansible rulebook engine, and we're going to see it's loading the sources, loading the filters. We can actually see that what event source I'm actually listening to. I can see that it's looking for a kind route. So all the things that we had in our Ansible rulebook are being captured here. So now that I have this source up and running, I'm going to start going to my second terminal over here. And here I'm already logged into this Bastion host. It's the same host as I was before. I'm going to make sure I am logged in to my OC login environment. And I'm going to go to this project directory, which has my exercises. And I have this Rocket Chat application. So this application, the application itself isn't important. What's important is that the route for the application is going to get properly updated. So here, this Rocket Chat application is just an application that you can go off and chat with different team members and so forth. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go off and create this, this application. And then we're going to see how it initializes the rulebook to actually fix the application. So the first thing I want to do is create the namespace. So OC project Rocket Chat. And when I do that, we can see from within my environment and projects. Let me see. Actually, might have misspelled that. Give me a second. There you go. So now I've created this new project, OC new project Rocket Chat. And if we can go to the OpenShift environment here, and we can actually go off and look for the different projects. So if I go to Rocket Chat, I can see the Rocket Chat project here. And if I go to different things like my pod workloads, there's nothing in the Rocket Chat right now. If I go to networking servers, there's just nothing. And there's definitely no routes here showing up. So now with the namespace created, what I want to do is actually go and install the application. When I go and install the application, what this is going to do is that it's going to fire a running job template to showcase, to come here and show this EDA OpenShift exercise 2 is running. But one thing I want to highlight is if you notice this application, when it's created, initially it's using HTTP, right? It doesn't have a secure certificate, right? It clearly says here that's connection not secure. But if we go to our Ansible automation platform, that event got kicked off. So when the application got created, a route was created, and that initiated an event to go off and tell Event-Driven Ansible to tell our Ansible automation platform controller to go and run this specific job template, the EDA OpenShift exercise 2. So when we go here, we can see that it went off and created an issuer, it created a certificate, and it patched the route. So initially, we saw that the route was a connection not secure. But if we go back to our OpenShift route section, we can actually see that the route no longer is HTTP, but it's actually HTTPS right now, right? So the route got patched and fixed. So when we go and click this, right, we can actually see the application is currently not available, but it will be in about a second. It takes a little bit. But if you notice, the certificate is valid, right? So we now have a connection secure. So what we were able to do is we were able to take an application that any developer could have gone and deployed within a OpenShift cluster, and we used Event-Driven Ansible to actually remediate any routes that are not having the security that we require by having a properly signed certificate. So if I refresh this, probably you'll see that the application is up and running now. You'll still notice that the connection is secure. And here we have the Rocket Chat application, which we're trying to now set up the wizard for. And with that kind of covers the demo. This kind of showcases you a little bit of giving you a summary of how to write an Ansible rulebook, how easy it is to write a rulebook. The logic of what you want to do is in your Ansible playbooks that are being run by job templates. And then effectively how you can interact with your OpenShift environment as well as, say, Event-Driven Ansible. So in this example, I gave an example how you can set up SSL management, and make updating your valid certificates. But really, you're not limited to that. Imagine you wanted to do something like, for example, taking volume snapshots of newly created PVCs in your applications within OpenShift. There's a lot of different options on how you can integrate OpenShift with Event-Driven Ansible and how you can interact with things outside of your OpenShift cluster. And with that, that's the demo. Now we're gonna go on to the next phase and take any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Hello. Let's see here. So give me 1 second. Let me pull up the questions. Roger, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear. Can you hear me?
Perfect. Yep. So the first question we have is, does EDA have to run via the command line as we showed, or will it be managed and have a GUI and Ansible controller? And I can answer that one. So you can run EDA in the command line like you saw in a container, but as part of Ansible Automation Platform, it will be integrated within the GUI. You won't have to kind of manage the containers. The platform will take care of that work for you, and it will be nicely integrated into the Ansible Automation Platform. And with that, the next question, and this kind of leads into that, is EDA available now? If not, when? And the answer is for Ansible Automation Platform, EDA will be available at the end of this month. I think the date is the 26th, I believe, the release date, around there. So look out for that, and EDA will be available soon.
The next I was going to jump in here. Sorry, I was going to jump in with a question I saw here too. Someone asked, are the topics applicable to various cloud platforms, as I'm hearing frequent reference to OpenShift? Yeah, no others like VM Cloud or Azure. So really kind of the focus around this particular webinar was Event-Driven Ansible with around OpenShift, but Event-Driven Ansible isn't limited to just running with OpenShift, right? Kind of one of the goals with, in general, Ansible is to be able to automate anything that you want to automate, right? So Event-Driven Ansible kind of works in the same thought process where we're going to have different source plugins that are available to you that are going to work with different cloud providers, for example, and you'll be able to capture events and then automate against those events. So hopefully that answers your question, Mark.
All right. Another question we have, and Roger, maybe you can answer this one. It is, what other events from OpenShift can trigger EDA and Ansible?
Yeah, so you're not limited to a specific like object in Kubernetes. Like I know I showed in the demo showing routes, but really it's any Kubernetes object that you want to watch for. And then it's just a matter of what you want to do with that event type. So whether it's like looking for when it's added, or looking for when it's modified, or if you're looking for it when it gets deleted, really you have many options on how you can engage with different Kubernetes objects. Yeah, you're not limited in that aspect.
Cool, thanks. The next question is there an additional charge for using EDA with Ansible Automation Platform? I'll answer that. Roger, you can jump in. I think the EDA is going to be part of the core Ansible Automation Platform capabilities. So there will not be any additional charge when you upgrade to the latest version. It will be included there. Then I think the last question we have, and if you have any more questions, you can just type them into the question and answer panel, and we'll get to them. I think the last one we have is at this moment is, and Roger, maybe you can answer this one, is what do I need to do to run an Ansible rulebook?
Yeah, so it's really easy to run a rulebook. Actually, a lot of your logic is in your Ansible playbooks. The rulebooks just contain a source. They contain the rules that you want to do, essentially the conditions, and then the action you want to take. So really, it's just a matter of having your source plugin that you want to use so you can capture the events, and then your rules, what conditions you want to be met, and then the playbook that you want to run or the job template you want to run, which would fall under the action. So it's pretty straightforward. And then running it, you have the option of running it like on command line. Once it's available in Ansible Automation Platform 2.4, you'll have a GUI version of being able to create your rulebooks there and run it off of there. So you definitely have different options on how you want to run your Ansible rulebooks.
Sounds good. Thanks, Roger. And we had one question come in while Roger's answering there that is, do you have guidelines for starting an initiative on different teams working strategies, devs, monitoring teams to solve? So what I think the question is, I'm going to try to reiterate, is that we're asking about what kind of strategies are there for your siloed teams to kind of work on automation initiatives. I will give an answer, then maybe Roger, you can also chime in. Right. So I think the view we have from Ansible Automation Platform here is that, right, this platform is the one kind of unifying system that all these different groups can use for automation and to kind of share what they're doing, kind of how they're automating things, and then all be able to see each other's work. I think the strategy from that perspective is that, like we always like to talk about, is to a crawl, walk, run kind of approach to these things, right? So it's really good for all your teams new to automation using the platform to start off in kind of the crawl scenario. And I'll use cloud for an example. So right, doing really, and I spoke about some of these earlier. So they're doing very simple kind of automation tasks like infrastructure, visibility for your cloud or your OpenShift clusters, right? These are kind of read-only actions that can really get you started into automation and understanding the platform, kind of sharing that vision with the other teams. But you don't have to worry about bringing your system down because you pushed the wrong config out or something like that. So it's really all about taking like these steps, and once you get comfortable doing kind of those read-only things like automating backups and visibility, you can move to kind of the walk type things, which it could be, doing some patching, working on some of your governance stuff, checking compliance, and then finally getting to the kind of run type heavy kind of invested automation, which is like your cloud operation fully, your business continuity, shifting traffic patterns, things like that, optimizing your hardware and your infrastructure. So, turning off resources when not needed, optimizing, what you have running, where and when. So that's kind of what we usually recommend. I don't know, Roger, if you had something you wanted to add to that.
No, I think you covered it well.
Okay, I guess if we don't have any more questions, I think we'd like to thank you all for joining us. Please check out the website and our labs. I think there's some links. You'll get a follow-up email to some of our labs you can try out and try automation for yourself. And thank you all for attending.
Thanks again.